The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hi, welcome to a discussion with Dr. William Sears. I'm Linda Hanner, author and public relations consultant, and Dr. Sears is the assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of Southern California School of Medicine. He is also the consulting editor of Baby Talk magazine. He and his wife, Martha Sears, have co-authored numerous books on child care and parenting. And today we're going to be talking about their most recent book that was published in January of 1993. The title is Baby Talk, Everything That You Need to Know About Caring for Your Baby from Birth to Age 2. Hi.
Thank you, Linda. It's good to be here.
Well, today let's start out by talking a little bit about how your book is different from some of the other baby books that have been written and published in the past.
Well, one of the reasons it's different is there's nuggets in there that mothers and fathers have shared with me over the 20 years in pediatric practice. And a few years ago, Martha and I just sat down and said, we have learned so much in parenting our own 8 children and all the things parents have taught us over the years that let's put all these little nuggets into a book. Mainly, it's different in that it emphasizes good nutrition. We feed babies differently than we did 20 years ago. It emphasizes a close style of parenting we call attachment parenting. It has a large section in there on called wearing your baby, how to carry your babies in various types of carriers, on calming the fussy baby, contemporary parenting, the double income family, and what to do if we have the great juggling act of 2 career families.
Yes.
So that's mainly why it's a little bit different.
Okay, well that's interesting. Talk a little bit more about this attachment parenting. I read a little bit about that as I was browsing through the book, and I noticed that some of the questions parents ask a lot is, should I pick up my baby every time he or she cries? And I know a lot of parents that still struggle with that issue.
They sure do, and they struggle, Linda, because parents want to do the best for their baby. And we all feel guilty, and I say, parents, that never gets better. You're always going to feel guilty at all ages. But the attachment style of parenting is basically a way of caring for your baby that brings out the best in the baby and the best in the parent. And there are 5 attachment tools. We call them starter tips, ways that you can start with your baby and then branch out on your own style. And those 5 attachment tips are birth bonding, wearing your baby a lot in a baby sling, sleeping with your baby, responding sensitively to your baby's cries, and breastfeeding. Those are 5 ways to get close to your baby. And if you start out the first few months with those 5 tips, and then as baby gets older and your lifestyle changes, your parenting styles, you can create your own parenting style based on those basic tools. Okay,
that's interesting. Well, I know one of the premises that you started out too when you were writing your book is that there's no perfect baby and no perfect parent. So I suppose there really are no perfect solutions either.
There aren't.
To parenting.
And it's just a matter of what's different nowadays is there is no real expert on babies. We want to make parents their own best experts instead of just following a book. In our book, we try these are ways that you can become your own expert, to know your baby, to help your baby feel right. A baby who feels right is going to act right. A parent who knows their child is going to enjoy their baby more. This is really why we went into parenting. We want to enjoy our kids.
One of the things that you mentioned in your book, too, is that attachment parenting actually fosters independence later on. And I thought that was interesting because parents are so worried sometimes that they're going to spoil their children at the beginning.
Yes, they sure are. The fear of spoiling, I would like to put that fear of spoiling on the shelf. To spoil forever.
That makes me feel better about the way I parented my children.
The old fear of spoiling, that if you picked your baby up a lot, and you carried your baby a lot, and if you nursed for years and you slept with your baby, you were going to create a terminally dependent and clingy and whiny baby. It's just the opposite. Babies who are carried a lot, who are nursed a lot, who are touched a lot, who are given a lot of attachment in the first few months, they become less clingy, more independent.
Right.
less spoiled. So parents can forget that term spoiling.
Well,
You don't spoil a baby.
I'm anxious to share that with the mother of my grandchild because
Really?
I know that's one of the issues that she's worried about. Now, how about breastfeeding? Do parents become, or do mothers become more attached to their babies if they breastfeed than if they don't, or isn't there a real correlation
Well, I don't
between
think I'm very hesitant to judge who's better and who's not, and I don't think breastfeeding mothers have a closer attachment to a baby than bottle feeding mothers because you can both get close. But breastfeeding is easier. It gives you a head start. And the reason is because every time a mother nurses her baby, not only does the mother give her baby her milk, but the baby gives something back to the mother. The baby, by the very act of sucking, causes a hormonal change to go on in the mother. So the mother, as it were, gets a shot of hormones every time she nurses her baby. And these beautiful hormones are what influences a mother's intuition. So it's easier for a breastfeeding mother to get closer and more attached to the baby. But I would hesitate to say that she's more attached than a bottle feeding mother.
Oh, okay. What about trends in breastfeeding? Are more mothers breastfeeding now than they were 10 years ago? Is it much more
mothers are
acceptable?
breastfeeding nowadays, although it's plateaued over the last couple years. But the main trend I see, and it's a wonderful trend, more mothers are breastfeeding longer. In fact, our Surgeon General, Dr. Novello, came out a couple years ago and advised mothers to breastfeed for 2 years. Now, the term years can sound a little bit unusual to many of us, but
I
we
know
were
I've heard
used to.
years ago mothers used to do that, and now people are kind of horrified by it.
They are, because that conjures up the fear of spoiling again. But what I've noticed, the babies in my practice, my pediatric practice, and our own friends, our circle of friends, babies who are breastfed for a year or two are the most independent, less clingy, less whiny, most well-behaved babies I have ever seen. So I say to mothers, when there's reaching a point when either you don't want to do it anymore, or a baby doesn't want to do it anymore, or usually babies want to quit long
before that. I noticed that was true of my children. The longest any of my children even wanted to breastfeed was for 5 months, and they were done. So
many babies nowadays will, if left to their own resources, will nurse for a couple years. Most mothers want to quit before the baby does.
They want that independence.
Yeah.
Another dilemma that many mothers face with newer babies is when to start introducing solid foods. I know with my grandchild, the mother started introducing solid foods fairly soon because he wanted to eat every hour, and she was having trouble keeping him full long enough so that she had a little break in between feedings. Is that pretty acceptable if the baby seems to want
things are
that?
a little bit different nowadays. We used to feed according to the calendar, that given a baby was now 2 months of age, it's time to start stuffing cereal into the baby in hopes they'll sleep better through the night, which doesn't make any difference. Today's parents, I think, are more nutrition savvy than we were years ago. What I advise parents to do is watch the baby, not the clock. Watch for signs of begging. When your baby watches you eat and watches your mouth and watches your plate and starts picking at things, usually around 5 or 6 months, and take a little mashed up banana as a test dose, and mash it up and put it on your fingertip and put it on the baby's tongue. And if the banana goes in and accompanied by a smile, then you know baby's ready.
Well, what about the processed baby foods then?
They're okay, but it's best, I feel, for parents to make their own baby food. Parents need to know what goes into the food, and we're the tastemakers of the next generation. And another thing parents often worry about too, not only when to start solids, but what happens when that toddler becomes the picky eater. You've been through that.
Yes.
We've all been through that. Toddlers don't eat; they graze.
That's true. They want to snack a lot.
They want to snack a lot. So what we found in our family, to take the hassles out of eating, and when you have a lot of children, you try to make life easier for yourself.
Yes.
We just make a little nibble tray, an ice cube tray, a muffin tin, and put little nutritious nibblies in there and give them childlike names like broccoli trees and orange wheels and cheese blocks. And you just leave that nibble tray on the child's own table. As the toddler toddlers around the house, he'll stop at the table and snack there at the table and refuel himself and then be on his way. And by the end of the day, that tray will be empty. That takes the hassles out
Sure.
of feeding. And then at mealtime is a time of communication.
Okay.
So the parents don't feel pressured now that they've got to stuff their child because he hasn't eaten all day.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because I think too often we try so hard to get them on our own schedule
Yes.
as far as eating, but if they're hungry in between, it's pretty hard to deny them.
Right, and
the
we forget
food.
that tiny babies have tiny tummies, and grazing's actually better for you and I
Yeah,
too.
actually,
But
that's
we just
true.
don't have the
We're
time for that.
starting to learn that, yes. You also talked about some of the good and bad sugars and the good and bad fats. I guess we're conscious of some of those things in our adult diets nowadays, but we don't often think of that with
Yes.
infants and toddlers as much.
We sure are
what-
more conscious. I think we're also, Linda, we're conscious about the food that a baby eats will affect the child's behavior.
Oh, okay.
And this is why parents often notice that children's behavior deteriorates late morning and late afternoon simply because they're hungry and the blood sugar is low.
Okay.
But if they graze most of the day, it prevents these ups and downs
More
of blood sugar
consistent.
and more consistent behavior.
Okay, that's
Yes.
interesting. I guess I never thought of it that way. I thought you hear a lot, at least maybe 5 or 10 years ago, they talked about sugar causing hyperactivity in children. Is there any truth to that?
Well, I think initially it was sort of overrated, but
Okay.
some children are vulnerable to the effects of junk food, of unhealthy sugars. Others, it doesn't seem to bother them.
Okay.
But one thing we've noticed in our family, what we do the first about 3 years, we will not give the child any junk food, knowing full well that when they get out into the real world and they go to their first birthday
They'll get
party,
it, yeah.
they're going to get that icing and frosting on the cake. But the difference in a nutrition food fed baby and child is they don't overdose on it.
Yeah, I think that I've noticed that with
Yeah,
my 2
have you?
oldest children. My youngest one developed a taste for sweets very young, and that's all he wanted. So when my second one was born, I didn't even introduce the fruits real soon, and I didn't give him the sweet things right away, and he never
Yes.
did develop the same kind of sweet tooth.
Exactly. They realize
so-
early on that good food makes them feel good and bad food makes them feel bad.
That's
so they
a
tend
good
not
idea.
to overdose on the bad food.
Yeah, if more parents could know that ahead of time, they'd probably be a
know.
lot happier in the long run. What about, I read a little bit about the tense mother, tense baby correlation, and a lot of times mothers are blamed for having crabby babies because they're probably
Yes.
just too nervous. And I know in my own situation, I by the time my third child came along, I thought I was so relaxed. I was expecting this easygoing baby as my second one had been, and here I had this really crabby baby that woke up every hour at night, and it was a complete surprise to me because I thought I had it down pat.
I know, and I know how you feel. We had the same experience. Our first 3 were easy babies. We thought, gee, this is a piece of cake. What's all this fussy baby stuff? Then came our 4th child, who absolutely turned our world upside down. She
Wow, what a
didn't
difference,
sleep well. She was peaceful as long as we held her. We couldn't put her down, or she'd cry a lot. And at that time, if she had been our first, we would have thought we were doing something wrong. But by the 4th child, we thought we knew a lot about parenting.
Sure.
That's when I first realized that babies fuss because it's their temperament, not because of your mothering or fathering abilities. So parents shouldn't take either the credit or the blame for the type of child the child becomes.
Yeah.
It's just their own temperament. And in fact, I'd like to change the term fussy baby to the term high-need child.
Okay.
It's a nicer term. It
Oh, yeah,
it
I like
sounds
that.
intelligent, it sounds bright, but that's really what they are. They come right at birth, as if they come right out of mom and look up and say, Mom and Dad, you've been blessed with an above-average baby, and I need above-average parenting. And if you give it to me, we're going to get along. If you don't, we're going to have a bit of trouble down the road. These babies come wired differently. They need lots of holding, lots of touching. They're slow to wean. They just need in-arms parenting for the first few months or years of their
And
life.
I suppose nobody knows why that is, why they are so different from birth and have such
no,
different
I wonder
needs
if
and
they just
personalities.
aren't smart babies.
That might be. But you know, one of the things that I discovered with my children is I have 4, and now they range in age from 16 to 24. But the ones that were the most demanding as babies actually have been the easiest as teenagers and more easygoing.
Yes,
as
we've
adults.
noticed that too.
Have you?
We've noticed
Okay.
that too. And I think it's a question of if a child gets their needs met early on, a need that's fulfilled early on goes away. And I think children who spend those early years getting their
Okay.
needs met are much happier, much more secure.
So
later
that
on.
may be part of it, that if you hold that baby
That's
a lot
right.
while they need it, then later on, as you mentioned, they'll become more
Yes.
independent. So
And,
it does actually
too,
work.
parents always wonder, will this ever last? Or how long will this last? And I just want to reassure them that the time at your breast, the time in your bed, the time in your arms, that attachment stage of parenting lasts a relatively short while, but the message of love and availability, that's going to last a lifetime.
Yes. Now, we talked about holding the baby when they want to be held and so forth, but what about a really colicky baby who screams for hours on end and that parent just is at their wits' end? Is it okay to put that baby, try to shut the door and walk away from it for a while just to keep your sanity?
Sometimes you have to do that, but a better approach is, we have a chapter in the baby book on called baby wearing.
Okay.
And that's the best prevention of colic that we've found. It's better than any medicine.
Okay.
And that simply means you put your baby in a baby sling and you wear your baby around the house or wherever you are, to work, wherever you go, to shopping. The more hours per day that you can wear your baby in a baby sling, the less colicky they become.
Okay.
And we actually, this was not our own invention. Parents, if you go to other countries, third world countries, you see mothers and fathers wearing their babies in baby slings. And I noticed that these babies cry less.
Okay.
So that's one of the best ways to prevent colic and
You
crying.
mentioned the father's role in that as well,
Yes.
which is helpful if the father can take over and carry the baby. And
That's real important, especially in today's society, Linda, that especially if mothers are required to share the income, fathers are required to share the baby care.
It sure will
And I think it's better. I know with our first couple children, I did not get involved until they were old enough to throw a football. I felt, well, baby tending was woman's job. That was a big mistake. Now I know better, and I get my hands on my babies early on, in the minute after delivery. And what I noticed also is the more involved fathers are, the less burned out the mothers are. The whole family operates
So the dynamics works
Sure, it's
better
better on their
overall.
marriages.
Yes. I've noticed even within my own family that my husband, as you know, by the time my fourth child came along, 8 years after the first one, that he was more inclined to want to hold and,
Yes.
and do things like that too, and the trends overall are changing, and that I see that as a really positive trend.
Right. Nothing develops a male better
Right.
and more sensitively than holding a tiny baby. And you
Right.
know, there are uniquely male things that dads can do with babies.
Yeah.
One is the warm fuzzy, where you just let the baby lie on dad's fuzzy chest with the ear over baby's heart rate. And also I have a little picture in the book called the neck nestle. The male voice vibrates more than the female, so if you just nestle baby right into the neck and let your cheekbones rest on baby's head, the vibration of the male voice will lull babies right to sleep. So the
Okay.
neck nestle and the warm fuzzy are male things that dads can do to comfort fussy babies.
That's good. You know, I think do you think it's helpful for fathers to take some parenting classes beforehand and learn about some of these things, and then they perhaps want to get more involved
I
and more
think so.
inclined to?
The more they can read, but probably the best is just talk to a group of experienced and
Parents.
involved dads. Have a rap session with dads who are really involved with their babies.
Okay. What about as they get a little bit older and they get into the temper tantrums?
Oh, yes.
My daughter threw more tantrums than all three of her brothers put together, and I would usually just take her and deposit her in the bedroom and shut the door until she was through throwing her tantrum. I know you address that issue a bit in the book as well. Is that appropriate?
Sometimes a child just needs time and space, as does the parent, to work it out. Other times, when a child loses control, sometimes they just expect somebody older and wiser than them to pick them up, to just scoop them up and say, honey, you're out of control. And I'm just going to hold you tight until you get into control. And you've given the message that you understand where they're coming from. And tantrums will stop around 2 to 3 years of age when babies have the words to express their feelings. That's why they're so common. Under 2 years of age, babies have a lot of feelings, but they don't have the words to express them, so they do so in tantrums.
Okay. Maybe they're a little bit more independent if they throw more tantrums
Oh,
or
and
more.
after all, we as adults let off steam too.
Sure.
We
sure.
slam the
Different
doors
ways.
or
Yeah.
kick a wall or something, and I guess we can expect babies to do that.
You had some pretty good advice on thumb sucking, I felt, in the book as well, and ways to help prevent the thumb sucking later on. Could you address that issue a little bit?
Well, thumb sucking, I think, bothers adults more than babies, except for the dental problems, which is a problem. Thumb sucking is a very normal and natural comforting tool. Babies suck their thumbs in the womb. But we have noticed that babies who get their sucking needs met early on, like babies who are breastfed a long time, babies who are held a long time, babies who have a close attachment in the early years, tend to suck their thumb much less later on. And if parents are worried about thumb sucking, talk to your doctor about it. If it's not bothering the child's teeth, then I wouldn't do a thing.
Okay, and
that stage will pass.
Is there a certain age at which, for instance, there are a few children that will continue doing it right up to school age?
Yeah.
Is that going to be a problem?
It usually becomes a dental problem after that. And the best thing to do as soon as you see the child sucking his thumb or her thumb, distract them.
Okay.
And also keep a little diary. Parents should keep diaries about behaviors, trying to figure out what triggers off the behavior. Are they bored? Are they hungry? Is it to get attention? What is the trigger? And try to intervene before the child puts the thumb in the mouth.
Okay, sounds good. I guess one of the other issues that a lot of parents have problems with, and this was one of the most trying times for me too, is during the years of toilet training, and I was given so much advice by my mother and my mother-in-law about when my kids should be ready to do this and when they should have that all taken care of, and they didn't fit the molds that they told me that they should, and it was frustrating to me, and it was all the way to my fourth child before I finally just accepted the fact that they probably weren't really ready for training by the time they were, till they were about 3. And in my case, I knew other kids that trained themselves at a year.
Well, good for you, Linda. You listened to your child instead of the norms of the neighborhood. And that's the difference of today. It's just like feeding children. We take cues from the child. You look at where the child is at developmentally. Some children are developmentally ready for toilet training at 18 months, others not until 2.5 years. The easiest is to wait for your child to give you about to go signs. They go over to they squat down in the corner, or they have language fart. They give you some signs that the child is aware of how their body functions. And after that, it's all uphill from then on. You just take the diapers off. You have days where you lose the diapers. Stores out of diapers, no more diapers. You let the child go bare bottom in the backyard on a warm day so they become aware of how their body functions. But you listen to the cues of your child. Take those cues, and it's a partnership between the parent and the child, like a coach on a baseball team. You just that's why it's called toilet training and toilet learning. You just learn the cues of your child and ride with it.
Okay, it's refreshing to know that your child isn't necessarily abnormal if they're not trained by 2.5.
And that's another thing that's changed today. So we're not into the competition anymore, that you're failing as a parent if your child is not trained as early as the next door neighbor, because the next door neighbor's child may be entirely different than yours.
Sure. Do you think first-time parents tend to compare their children more too with other parents?
So.
And I know that was true in my case. If the neighbor's child was walking at 8 months or 9 months, there was something wrong with my child because he wasn't, and it would be helpful if parents were prepared for that ahead of time. So know that eventually they usually catch up.
Sure, and we're a setup for guilt as parents.
Yes.
The love for your child is so intense that anytime your child isn't doing what the norm is, you take it personally. And I don't think that ever gets better. You're always going to feel guilty about your children, your grandchildren.
Wonder if you're doing everything right
That's
or
right.
not. You also help the parents who adopt children to learn how to adjust, and offer some tips for them in their book. And what are some of the different types of bonding that occur with parents who adopt versus parents who have their own children, or does it all kind of even out eventually so that they feel the same kind of attachment?
Oh, I think they do. In fact, our 8th child is adopted, and Lauren is now 10 months of age. And I worried a little bit before the adoption, am I ever going to be as close to her since she is not biologically mine?
Okay.
A resounding yes.
Okay.
It might have been a little slower to evolve, but at 10 months, I feel as close to her as if she were biologically ours. She is our baby.
Okay, so you had 7 before you adopted.
Yes.
That's interesting.
But she is our baby. We had a very open adoption. We were right there in the delivery room when she was born.
Oh, okay.
And my wife even breastfed by means of a supplementer. And we held her a lot. We did everything that biological parents would do. And I think that start helped us bond with her.
Sure, I can see where that would. I noticed that when my husband was in the delivery room, when my children were born, it made a big difference in his desire to be involved in their care as well.
And about birth bonding too, Linda, I want to make a point that in case there are parents who couldn't bond with their baby right away, and there are medical problems separating mom and baby, or dad and baby, the bonding issue, I think, was oversold when it first came out. Bonding is not like some instant glue that if you hold your baby in the first second after birth, this is going to be a lifelong relationship. Bonding is a series of events. It's a series of relationships. It takes time to evolve. But just the earlier you start with your baby, the earlier you get close to your baby, the easier it becomes. But I don't want parents to...
So it's not too late if it doesn't happen
never
right
too
away.
late,
Well,
no.
that's good to know too. I know that a lot of parents, working parents, probably don't have as much time as they would like to spend with their babies too.
Absolutely. We don't either. As professional parents, my wife and I, Martha, we're very busy. Yet there are ways that you can be a busy parent and be an attached parent. One of the things we've vowed to do is to not let a distance develop between us and our children. And for example, things that you could do for working mothers when they come in, say at 6 weeks or so, and say, I'm going back to work, but I don't want a distance to develop between my child and I. Here's the things that you can do. One is continue breastfeeding. If you're breastfeeding, mothers don't have to automatically think, now that I'm going back to work, I've got to wean. You can juggle both. Half-time breastfeeding is a way of keeping that connection going. Another time is sleeping with your baby at night. By giving that closeness at night, it helps you to reconnect with your baby at night to make up for that lost time during the day. Wear your baby in a carrier as much as you can when you're with the baby. And in fact, sometimes mothers have the type of job they can take their babies with them. We call it work and wear. And if they have that type of job, it's wonderful.
Well, you certainly have lots of good advice, and you have not only written this book, but you've lived it, obviously, as a father of 8 children, and with your co-author, Martha Sears. And I just want to thank you for sharing some of those tips with us today, and this comprehensive baby book, which certainly will be helpful for a lot of
Thank you, Linda. I
parents.
enjoyed being here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.